Hi everyone, it's Kimberley here from Autism Oxford. This video is part of our eating disorder series this week in helping to raise awareness around eating disorders and disordered eating. Now, I wanted to do a video particularly around use of cutlery. This is a conversation often occupational therapists will have with families and individuals, but we've also seen this as well within diagnostic assessments when we're thinking about autism and ADHD. We can often hear people say, well, I can't use cutlery, so I just use my hands, so I'll finger eat. We can hear people say, I'm constantly reminding my young person to cut up their food, and they won't cut it up, they just stab the food and they just pop it in their mouth and will kind of gorge on it, and that can cause a choking risk. Now, cutlery we think is quite easy and quite straightforward to use, however, it can be really difficult for some of our neurodivergent individuals. So if we think about how we use cutlery, so if I've got a fork here, for example, I'm having to grip. And if there's a difference in how my grip is, actually holding a fork is really hard. Now, I don't hold a fork like this and stab, so I normally put my finger up and I would normally put down like that. Similarly the same when we use a knife. I don't hold a knife like this and try and cut, I often have to do this. So that you see there's some complex hand postures that we're having to use when we're just simply cutting and eating our food. Now I'm using both hands together as well, so that's an added extra complexity that we add into when we're using cutlery as well, which can also be really problematic for some of our young people and individuals. Now I am all for strengths-based approach, so if cutlery isn't for you, then cutlery isn't for you, and that is absolutely okay. As parents, sometimes we get a bit hung up on that, and we think, well, actually people are going to think my child's rude, it's not good table manners. Sometimes we're just going to have to let that go, and sometimes we might just need to adjust what we're cooking and what we're preparing, so it's more finger food based. So things like burgers, for example, obviously they actually use their hands much more. Thinking about carrot sticks or cucumber sticks or battens, rather than thinking about slicing it up where you'd expect it probably to use a knife and fork a bit more. So there's ways around this. We can still keep the food coming in, but without then the expectation of using our knife and fork. If we're supporting individuals who are autistic with a PDA profile, food will be a demand and will be an expectation. Then you're adding another layer of demand and expectation of being able to use simple things like a knife and fork. Now, that isn't then simple, that becomes a real challenge, and we're making the eating process even more anxiety provoking than it needs to be. Filled with lots of expectations and filled with lots of demands. Now, some of the things I found in my journey at home being really helpful is thinking about the different types of cutlery as well. So I have the young people at home will often not cut food up and they'll just shove it in their mouth rather than necessarily not wanting to use cutlery. Now, when they're younger, you can use things like coloured cutlery, something that's playful. That can be really helpful in terms of encouragement and kind of making it a bit more interesting. Having colour contrast as well can be really helpful for people with visual differences as well and depth perception needs, and making sure that that is different from their plates. So, for example, just this one earlier. So this plate with this knife, this fork, for example, would be brilliant. It's great different colour contrast, so it helps me work out where things are in place and space, which is brilliant. The other thing with my daughter particularly is around cereal and using a spoon for cereal. Now, this is quite a big spoon, but it's a spoon we would typically use for our cereal and eating. However, it's quite a big mouthful on there, particularly if our children are younger. But for some adults as well, that can feel quite overwhelming still. So simply placing it with a teaspoon makes a big difference. Now you're thinking, well, that's common sense. Like, why are you doing me a video on using a teaspoon over a tablespoon? Well, actually, sometimes we forget. We just naturally place that out because that's what we did when we were younger. That's what our parents did. But actually using the teaspoon may get the uptake in eating much more. So that is a whistle-stop tour in different use of cutlery and some of the challenges we may see. If you're experiencing challenges with using cutlery around your eating, or you're a mum or a dad or a family carer that is also worried and concerned or frustrated about their young person using cutlery, do speak to one of our fantastic occupational therapists. They can do a brilliant assessment. They can think about then different adaptations that might need to be made around use of cutlery. and they've got some great advice and signposting they can do. If you want to book in with our OTs or occupational therapists, they're more commonly known as, please email us at therapies@autismoxford.org.uk or have a good look at our website. Many thanks.